Hello everyone, this is Ron Williams with Web Builder Templates. Today's video is about breakpoints and what the settings mean in Manage Breakpoints. Um, I was recently asked about this and why I recommended one particular setting over the other in a previous video. So hopefully this video will show you a bit more in detail as to why I recommend one over the other. So let's get started. One of the first things I do always recommend is obviously when you set up a new project is to make sure that you set your page properties to what you want as far as your page alignment, your page width, etc. And the other thing would be your tools under your options, particularly under HTML. Obviously all these you want to take a look at, but I always want to make sure that your settings here are what you want as well. As you can see, here's a typical setup that I use for many of my projects. This is probably another video in itself as to why I particularly choose these. So once you've set everything up, one of the things that you have to consider is down here in your for your breakpoints in the Manage Breakpoints property. As you can see, when you open it up, there are two options down here, and this was where the question arose from is we have two options. I believe I stated in a previous video that activate breakpoints when browser window is larger than the device width is the one that I would recommend versus the other one which says activate breakpoints when the browser window is smaller than the device width. Before we kind of dive into this, and hopefully I don't make it too confusing, because it can get kind of confusing when you start thinking about it. Think of this as the very first option. If the browser window is smaller than the device width, think of that as max width. Okay? In other words, I want you to see this particular breakpoint when the max width of the device is this, whatever that may be. And think of the second one as minimum width. All right, so we're going to think max width, minimum width. Keep that in mind. Hopefully that'll make seem, it'll be a little more apparent down the road here as to why. So let's take a look at something that I created here to kind of show you a little bit about this. So first of all, let's talk about breakpoints. These 6 breakpoints are the ones I typically use if I'm going to use a breakpoint. Just in my research and looking at different websites, and which I'll list below the video here, there are several websites you can go out and see lists of different device widths, all kinds of phones and tablets, and just based on a lot of what comes out of those lists, these 6 usually typically will cover you in most cases, and I've not had any problems ever really using them in any of my designs, so I've just kind of stuck with it. Now whether you use one, it depends on your layout. I'm not saying always use 6. You may only need 4 or 3. It really depends on your design. So let your design determine whether or not you need a breakpoint. Don't just put one in there to put one in there. That just ends up bloating your code, and it's not necessary to have that breakpoint. One thing that you have to consider, though, every device has what is considered a viewport width, and that's what we're talking about here, is the viewport width, the actual part of the screen you see your website on. It's not the resolution of the device, it's not any of that. It's the viewport width, and that's what the breakpoints represent. So what you have to kind of think about, again, what I want you to think about is max width and min width. All right, so the first option is max width, and basically what that is saying is, do you want users to see this breakpoint? Okay, keep that in mind. When you create a breakpoint, do you want users to see that layout or that content if the device is equal to or smaller than the breakpoint? That's what max width is. So if you make a 480 pixel breakpoint, do you want devices that have 480 pixel viewport width or less to see that layout? Or do you want them to see if it's equal to or greater than the breakpoint? So when you create a 480 pixel breakpoint, do you want devices to see a minimum width of 480 or above to see it? So the breakpoint is, again, is you're either saying, look, I want devices greater than this to see this layout or less than. And that's what the difference is, max and min width. Minimum and above, max or below. And that's kind of what these lines up here try to represent. So if this is our devices, as they get bigger, when you use max width or the first option, what it's going to do is at every breakpoint that you put into your design, it's going to add a max width value there. Okay? So, for example, at this point, it's going to put a max width of 360. If you put a 360 breakpoint, that means that any device that has a viewport width of 360 or less is going to see this layout, the 360 layout. The minute that viewport width goes above 360, it is going to now view the 480 because the next breakpoint that you put in is 480. So any device that's 480 or below but greater than 360, okay, is going to see this layout. Okay, let's say you made a 768 breakpoint layout. Okay, same thing happens here. It's going to put a max width value at 768, and it's going to say anything 768 or below but above the 480 is going to see this view. Okay, and then anything bigger than that, it's going to see your desktop view or your default view if we're using 4 breakpoints. Let's take a look at that. I created a page where I actually have a default view of 1366, and I've got 3 breakpoints. Okay, so for example, if we go back to this page, a Kindle, an Amazon Kindle, their viewport width is around 480 or a little bit above. I think some are 533 I've seen. There's different Kindle sizes, but they typically are between 480 and definitely less than 768. So what does that mean on my design here? Well, if I'm looking at my breakpoints, when someone views this website with these 3 breakpoints in the default view with a Kindle, all right, and I'm using max width, or the very first option in this case right here that I've got checked, if the viewport on that Kindle is 580, or 580, let's just say it's 580, well, it's going to, which one is it going to use? Well, if these are all max width, it's not going to see the 360 because it's bigger. Is it going to see the 480? No, because again, it's saying anything 480 or less, you're going to see the 480. So it's actually going to see the 768 layout because it's less than 768 but greater than 480. Okay, that's what it's going to see. But let's say that we choose the minimum value. Okay, so what's that do? Well, what it's going to do is it's going to say, okay, which layout am I going to see? Is it going to see the 768 one? Well, what min means is you're going to see 768 if the minimum width is 768 or greater. When I say greater, greater up until the next breakpoint. So it's in between. So if it's greater than 768 but less than the next breakpoint. Well, in this case it's not. If my width is 580, I'm not going to see the 768 in this case. I'm going to see the 480 because it's going to be greater than 480 but less than 768. So you can see that alone right there, depending on which one of these you choose, you're going to see a different layout. In the first one, you're going to see the 768 layout, but in the second, you're going to see the 480 layout. All right. Now, great. You're going to see two different layouts. So how's that obviously the layout's going to look different because your 480 layout may look completely different than your 768. But does it matter? How else does it play into things? It makes a huge difference. You have to understand that most devices are going to scale to some degree. So if let's go back to here's another example. All right, let's if I am going to see if in this case we were using 580, if I'm using max width on and my device is 580, I'm going to see the 768 because it's going to, again, the first one is max width. So if the max width is 768 or less, I'm going to see the 768. In this case, that's what I'm going to see. But think about it. When you design your 768 layout, you are dedicating 768 pixels across the screen. But my device is only 580, right? So that's a difference of 188 pixels. So there's going to be an extra 188 pixels in this layout, okay, that my screen is not going to see. Because what's going to happen typically, and I've had this happen myself in the past, and I've had other people say it, you ever look at a website, it initially scales it, but then when you fiddle with it, you can zoom out, and all of a sudden now you've got a white streak down the right side because you're trying to fit a 768 pixel layout in a 580 pixel viewport width, right? So the only way you can do that, it has to scale back, right? But if it scales back, all of a sudden now, not only does it get smaller, but now you've created that white strip on the right side, all right? But this does not happen if you use activate breakpoints when it's larger or using min width, because when you use min width, again, your browser is going to automatically scale. So for example, my width is 580. If I'm using min width, it's going to see the 480 layout. So what am I doing? I am now trying to show a 480 width or 480 pixel page width or view layout in a 580 wide device. But our devices are going to scale that to fit it, right? So it's just simply going to blow that up just a little bit to fill the screen, but you're not going to be left with the white strip, and it's going to fit perfectly, okay? So in every case, using the min width is always your best bet. Because of that, you don't end up having that zoom problem. And I'm going to show you, here's a good example. I've made a couple of examples for you. So an example of max width. All right, I've got, this is basically this page that I've created right here. It's a default of 1366, and I have 3 breakpoints. And I'm using, let me hop back over here. I am using this first activate point when it's smaller, so it's using max width. All right. This strip here is a floating layer that fills the entire screen. Okay, it's full width. And what I did was on every page, you can see I added a blue block just to the right and below the layer in each layout. All right, that's all I did. But watch the results. And down here you'll see I've got a little extension that I've built. It's a free extension if you guys are interested. It tells you exactly how big the screen is. So using max width, I'm at 1366 pixels. As you can see, everything looks fine as I squeeze down. When I get to right here, I'm at 1366. Now this is max width. All right, the minute I go below 1366, it's going to jump into the next breakpoint. It should. We haven't got there yet, but notice what's happening. The blue block is almost off the screen. See that? And you'll also notice that the scroll bar is down here. See that? And that's what happens. Notice this white bar is there? And that's what you will see on your mobile devices if you're using the max width option. Just as I was explaining earlier, when you're trying to fit a 768 pixel width on a 580 device width, and at some point it's going to, when it gets to the 768, it's going to jump there. See, there's the 768 right there. No scroll bar. But watch again as I start to shrink again. Oh, there's that horrible scroll bar again. And as you can see, of course, my browser decides to stop. That's what happens. Now, we're going to do the same thing with min width. If we use the second option with min width, watch what happens. As you can see, we're almost there. As you can see down here, we're at 1372. As soon as that gets to 1365, it's going to flip. Ah, that's the way it should look. Because what it's saying is, when you look at this, it's saying anything minimum of 768 all the way up to the default, which is 1366, but really 1365, because remember, as soon as it goes to 1366, now we're into the next. So anything greater than 768 but less than 1366, that's where we're at right now. As soon as, when we went from here, look at that. Right down here you can see we're at 1366. The minute I go one down, less than 1366, it now shows me the 768 breakpoint. And it's going to continue to show me the 768 breakpoint until I get down to 767. And then that's the minute I do that, boom, it flips to the 480. You notice I don't have any horizontal scroll bars. You notice that there's no white bars. This fills 100% of the screen at all times. And what I've just basically designed shows up the way it should. And again, if I go back to max width, you can see what happens. All right. Also, to show you visual differences, I ran this through Responsinator to kind of show you the same thing. So here's the breakpoints that I used. Here's the visual differences. Again, the max width is the content is seen. The content that you see is equal to or smaller than the breakpoint width. So you can see here I've got a iPhone expensive in portrait mode. It's got a viewport width of 375. But keep in mind this is max width. So if I've got a max, if my viewport is 375, I'm going to see the 480 layout, because remember this is 360. It's not smaller than 360, so I'm not going to see its layout, but it is smaller than 480. That's what I'm going to see. But as you can see, it's cut off because and there's a horizontal scroll bar because I'm trying to fit a 480 width layout in a 375, so it's overflowing. If this was an actual cell phone, you could pinch it and zoom out, or actually zoom out, and it would shrink and you would fit it on the screen. But then you're going to have the issue with the white bar down the side, and of course you're zooming your picture back a little bit, you're making it smaller. Whereas over here on the right side, using the min width, you can see at 375 it's saying, okay, a min width of 360, all with a max width of 479 essentially. So it's going from a minimum up, and it's showing this layout, the correct layout that you should see at 375. 480 is too big to show on this phone, but 360 is not. Let's go down here. Here it is, an iPhone 6 and 8 through 8 in landscape mode. Same situation. In landscape mode, it has a 667. Well, if we're using max width, 667 is going to show me the 768 because it's less than 768 but greater than 480. But see, you get the same issue happening here with the scroll bar and it off screen. Whereas if you use min width, it's going to be a minimum of 480 but less than 768. So it's going to show me the 480 layout, which fits on my screen much better. And lastly, here's an iPad in landscape mode. All right, landscape mode shows 1023 is my width. Well, again, if we look at max width up here with our breakpoints, it's greater than the 768, but it's less than, so it's going to show me the 1366 layout, which again is way too wide. You're trying to cram a 1366 pixel display or layout into a 1023. So that's why it's overflowing and causing the scroll bar. Whereas here, it's showing me the one below it, the 768. So I'm always assured that my layout is going to be shown in the screen. Now, you know, this to me, it's pretty much foolproof and safe that your design is going to be seen, and you're not going to have scroll bars and other issues. And that's why essentially I recommend when you do your layouts that you choose the second one. This is the min width option, not the max width. You want to use this one just for that purpose. It'll save you a lot of headache down the road when you're testing on different devices and can't figure out why your bar won't extend across and there's a white bar down the side and why I have a horizontal scroll bar and all that stuff. One other quick thing I want to mention that also came up on one of my videos, which is kind of related to this, is the scroll bar. I had mentioned in a previous video that my breakpoints, these are the common breakpoints, but in all honesty, I said instead of putting in 1920 as my breakpoint, I would put 1900. I subtract 20 from every one of these. Instead of 1366, I'll use 1346. 1024, I'll change it to 10 or 1004. I subtract 20. And why is that? Because of the scroll bar over here, as you can see. Now, for the most part, the scroll bar is not quite 20 pixels. It's about 17 pixels to be exact. On Chrome, Firefox, Edge, Brave, Vivendi, I believe all of those, the scroll bar is about 17 pixels. Opera is the only different one. I think it's at 15. I use 20 just because it's easier to do math instead of subtracting 17, but you could do 17 if that's what you want to do. But I make my breakpoints to take into account of the scroll bar, okay? Because you have to understand viewport width. There's when you say something is 100% width of the screen, or 100 VW, which is viewport width. Those are two things that you may see or may happen in some of your code, depending on what you're doing. There's a difference between 100% and 100 VW. 100% takes into account the scroll bar, whereas 100 VW does not. So if anything is the width is expressed as 100 VW, it's not taking into account that scroll bar, and can sometimes cause a horizontal scroll bar. for example, look at my page now. You'll notice there is a horizontal scroll bar down here. If I go back to this page that I actually created, all right, if I come all the way over here, as you can see, all my objects are within my 1920 layout. All right, I don't have any objects outside of that that should cause a scroll bar problem. All right, but what I am using is max width for one. But what's happening is when you view this, even though everything is within the screen width, um, it's not taking into account the scroll bar. However, if I were to simply create my breakpoint, and down here, excuse me, let me go up here to page properties. See, on this page, I created the exact same page and I changed it to 1900, 1920. Okay. If we view that page, notice there is no scroll bar at the bottom. So I always include that. Now, someone also commented too, well, mobiles don't have scroll bars present on the screen like a desktop top, and that is true. So theoretically, probably for 360, 480, maybe even 768, you wouldn't have to subtract the 20. You'd probably be safe to do that. Would it hurt if you do? Not at all. But if you don't, you're probably fine too. 1024 and up, I'd probably start subtracting it. Even though you might be looking at it on an iPad, you have to remember if you're using min width, your min width is going to be from 1024 to 1366, for example. You may have other devices in that range that do have a scroll bar, a Chromebook, a MacBook, a small laptop type could fall into that range, and therefore, so that's why I would suggest on 1024 and up, you do subtract the 20, because it certainly makes a difference. I've had many times where I've worked on a project and I get just a little bit of a horizontal at the bottom, and I never understood why that was. Just like here, I'm like, I don't get it. I've searched, and it dawned on me after reading some other articles that the scroll bar is not taken in account. So if you make your breakpoint just a little bit less, 100% or 100 VW will always fit, and you'll never have that horizontal scroll bar show up. Anyway, if you have any comments or questions, please leave them below. Hopefully this video has helped a little bit into why I choose one over the other. So shoot me your questions, and thanks for watching.